I should see it on YouTube in a second. Right, welcome everybody. Oracle here, and that's Mike Greenaway, the esteemed rugby journalist from Independent Online. And we've teamed up together. We've known each other for years. In fact, only met a couple of times. And I've got to get. Sorry, I just put it on the screen here to see if it was going on. And yeah, we're going to go through some interesting rugby talk every week. Not every week. We'll probably do 2 or 3 a month, and we're going to move it over to a Wednesday. We just gave it a go on a Thursday night, and yeah, it'll be about a 15 to 20 minute show, possibly as long as 25 minutes. You're welcome to put your comment on the show. You're welcome to ask us questions, and it's really about looking at some of the interesting stories around rugby that may not be necessarily mainstream, and we'll give our comments, and they may be a bit controversial, and we might not always agree and probably disagree a bit more often. So, yeah, it should be quite interesting. Anyway, welcome, Mike. This is your debut on YouTube. How are you feeling? You ready to go?
Oh, pretty cool, man. Gav, it's good to work with you. This is either a marriage made in heaven or a marriage made in hell, but I think we'll have some interesting rugby debates nonetheless.
All right, so first up, we're going to talk about, let's go through a very quick one. This is going to take us not a long time. Nkosi and his passport. Now, I've got to say, I've got a mate who flies all around the world, and he goes through like 2 or 3 passports a year. And he's got, obviously, these are the max passports that have got pages and pages and pages. And I've got to say, who's to blame when a player's passport is not ready or doesn't have enough pages or the visa's not done? Surely there's somebody at the union that looks after this. Is there someone to blame? Is this a bunch of people, or is this a common thing? I don't know. I've never heard the story before.
I mean, how does this happen? It just really shouldn't happen at the pinnacle of professional sport. I mean, they've got managers who look after it. I mean, the players hand in their passports to a manager, and the manager then books them in on the flights. That's how it works. The players don't queue up individually to go through passport control. It's all done by a person whose job it is to do that. So surely that person is going to look through the passports, and they know if your job is to make sure the passports are okay, you know that you've got to have enough space in your passport for a stamp. And if you haven't, you don't travel. And that's what's happened to Nkosi. So I would say, yes, okay, he's big enough and old enough and ugly enough and fat enough, as the saying goes, to know as well that his passport should be in order. But if he should fail, there's a person in the management who should pick that up. So that's someone's got a red face somewhere.
And also, it goes without saying, I suppose, that although the player is the obvious loser in this case, he doesn't get to go over, he doesn't get to play. But we, the viewers and the fans, we're the bigger loser. I mean, yes, in this case, it might not be that specific, but, you imagine you get a guy like, I mean, if this had happened to Sia Kolisi, would they have fixed the problem? Would they have made a plan? Or are they just going to say, sorry, mate, your passport's not good enough, we can't do anything?
Good question, Gav. But I tell you what, Nkosi will be really, really annoyed because he's trying his best to cement his place in the Springbok side. I mean, that's Cheslin Colby has pretty much got the number 14 jersey. We know that, but injuries happen, and it has happened to him. And he's got a fight on his hands. I mean, he's also losing out on quite a match fee. I mean, and he would have played. He would have been the starting 14. So now he's lost out on quite a lot of money. And then also, what could have happened is, okay, they put a stopgap in there in Jesse Kriel at number 14. And I don't necessarily think they made the right decision there, because I think Fassi should maybe have had a go there. Now, let's just say Fassi played on Saturday and had an absolute blinder and then jumped ahead of Nkosi in the queue, and it's all because he didn't look after his passport properly. I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's crazy. I wonder how that even works in other sports. Like, I think about the tennis players and the golfers. I mean, they've also got people looking after them. But yeah, anyway, let's jump on. We'll jump on to the next one. Players are now allowed to play for their birth countries. To return to their birth countries is probably the right way these are players that have obviously played for other countries. So, you mentioned this.
Can I just interject there?
Yep.
Okay, I think we've jumped the gun a little bit there with what's written up on the screen. World Rugby is going to vote on whether
they're voting on. Okay, well, there we go.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just explain what's happened there.
I'll do a quick edit while you're talking.
Yeah. So what happens now? If you want to play for another country that's not the country of your birth, you've got to qualify for 3 years residency in another country. Now, what World Rugby is saying is they're going to vote on doing the opposite. Okay, and they've got to get a 75% vote for this to go through at their meeting on the 24th of November. And what it is when a player is no longer playing for his adopted country, they're saying that let him not play then for 3 years for that country, and then he can qualify for the country of his birth or his mother's country or his grandmother's country. And I think what they're really looking at here is to redress the problem that's happened with the Pacific Islands, and specifically because Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, those guys, they produce so many players for top tier countries. And sometimes they only play for a season or two. Not all of them. Some of them play for the All Blacks forever. But quite a few, play maybe a season or two, and then they discard it. And Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa are going to World Cups with pretty pathetic teams. And those guys who are no longer playing for New Zealand, Australia, England, Ireland, whoever, could then go back and play for those countries, and they would be a heck of a lot stronger. So I think that's what this is all about. So they're voting on that in a couple of weeks' time. And if it goes through, then players can go back to their previous country after a 3 year stand-down period. And I think...
my first question here, Mike, in fact, I'm going to suggest it's the obvious question. What's with the 3 years? I mean, you got a guy who plays for, another country. Let's take this Lighty from Kersney that's gone up to Scotland, right? So he's Dylan Richardson, right? So he's gone up to Scotland. Let's say he plays, I don't know, I think he's about 22 or 23. Let's say he plays till he's 26 and they don't pick him for, I don't know, 10 games. And then he realizes, hang on a second, they're done with me. I'm not interested. Look, it's an unlikely scenario, but, is he now going to have to wait until he's 29 before he can play for South Africa again? I think that's. Yeah, I think this should be almost a one-way ticket. That once you, a return ticket, but with no return after that. So I do think a period of time is fine, but I think 3 years is a bit rough, especially the home country. And let's talk about your Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa example. Do they want a guy's going to get to them? He's 30 years old. He's saying, all right, well, I can't be picked again. No, he's waiting till 33. He's got to keep his fitness up. He's got to do all sorts of stuff. He's not earning any money. And then when he's 33, they're going to say, sorry, mate, you're not good enough. I don't know. That 3 years worries me a bit.
I guess what they're saying is it takes you 3 years to qualify for a new country. So it must take you 3 years to re-qualify to go home. The actual period is debatable. But ultimately, what I think they're trying to do is make sure that like the likes of Tonga or Fiji are a bit stronger. But I mean, Tonga's getting 104-0 against the All Blacks. They're getting 100.
But you saw when they played that game in New Zealand, they were basically looking for people that were living in New Zealand that could play rugby and were from Tonga. I mean, they had some school
out of the
teachers
gym to come and play against the All Blacks. It's crazy. But then you think of how many Tongans are playing in top-tier countries. I mean, just think about England, the Vunipolas. The list goes on. Bundi, Aki at Ireland. There's so many Islanders. Now, let's say they were finished playing for their top-tier countries. They could then go back and play for Tonga, albeit maybe they're 32 or maybe they're 30 or 30. But especially at World Cups, and I think that's where World Rugby would like World Cups to be a lot more competitive. So if those island nations could be augmented by players who are coming back or returning home, so to speak. And it's not just whether you've were born in Samoa, Tonga, or Fiji.
It's about the heritage as well.
Yeah, because one thing I'd like to maybe just point out while we're on that subject of the islanders is, a country, Samoa, has a total population of 200,000 people. I mean, that's the whole lot, everyone in Samoa, 200,000 people. And yet you look at how many brilliant rugby players they produce for the rest of the world. Tonga, I'm just looking at my notes at Tonga, 105,000. That's all there is in Tonga, men, women, and children. And look how many great rugby players they've got around the world. So those islands, and I've got scientific, I've read about this. There's scientific proof that Polynesian rugby players are the best rugby players in the world because they have more fast twitch muscle fiber than Caucasians, for example. I'm not being a bit of a quack here. This is irrefutable.
No, that's certainly interesting. I'd never heard of that, but I suppose that
some people
you look at
have more fast muscle twitch fiber than others, and Polynesians do. So they're born rugby players. I mean, a Tongan population of 105,000 people produces the players they do. Go figure.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I do like I like the concept. I like the idea, and a lot of the time these guys go. I'm not going to use the word poached, but they get almost talked into going to play for a country initially, especially for money. And our problem in South Africa, obviously, we have quite a few people going over to Europe. Again, Dylan Richardson, the example I was talking about earlier, he didn't even give himself a chance to play for South Africa. Would he have played? Would he have been good enough to play? We don't know that yet, but he's taken a route, and he might wake up at 26 or 27 or 29 years old and say, hang on a second, maybe I want to try and switch over. But I just think that time's a bit of a long one. Yeah. All right, so let's move on. You have an interesting story for us with regards to South Africa's history at Wales since 1995, the 1999 game, the Millennium Stadium game.
Yeah, whenever the Springboks are due to visit the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, I always think back to a really quite peculiar story that not a lot of people know, and it relates to the Springboks' first ever defeat to Wales. And that was in 1999. And it was before the 99 World Cup. So the Springboks were still the reigning world champions because they won in 95. And Wales was opening the Millennium Stadium, 1999, just on the eve of the new millennium. They called it the Millennium Stadium. So they invited the Springboks as the current World Cup holders at that time to come and open it. Now, to give a bit of background, a year before, the Springboks had beaten Wales, I think it was 95-14 or something. It was definitely...
that was a ridiculous score. I remember that game.
Yeah, that was in 1998. That was that brilliant team that Nick Mallett put together, the Gary Teichmann team that came within a game of breaking the world record. So they were a shit-hot rugby team. And they went over to commemorate the opening of the stadium. They lost like 19-9, I think the score was, and 29-9, and the Springboks were completely flat, and people were puzzled. They scratched their heads. How could this brilliant team that had won by 90 points a year before lose so comprehensively? And then the story started to come out. This was actually quite months later, in fact, maybe even a couple of years later, that there'd been a heck of a to-do before the test match. Now, what had happened is Nick Mallett had picked a team for the match that was all white. It was 15 white players. Now, the previous match, the warm-ups before they went there, they'd played Italy twice. In one of the games, they'd won 102-0 or something, and the other one was like 84-0 or something. And in those games, Dion Kaiser... That was
the Italy game was in Port Elizabeth, I think.
One was in PE and one was...
It was 40-0 at half-time and then 101-0 at the end of the game, or 101-3 or something. I remember that.
So Brayton Paulson made his debut in the PE test and scored a hat-trick. Dion Kaiser played in the Durban test and scored a hat-trick. They then went across to Cardiff to play Wales, and neither of them were in the team because Mallet had given them opportunities against Italy, and then he reverted to his first choice wings, which was Stefan Tablanche. And to be fair to Stefan, he scored 5 tries against Italy. So, I mean, and Peter Rousseau, they'd been his wings for quite a long time. What happened is the politicians in South Africa had a look at this, what they saw as a backward step to an all-white team after these black players had come through, and they got hold of Rian Oberholz, who was the SAFA CEO at the time, and they said, this is not on. Now, Nick Mallet had a clause in his contract at that time that he could select on merit, because there was no quota regulations at that time, as there are now, that there must be a specific number of players of different hues in the team. So Mallet was at liberty to pick who he wanted. There was no sort of finger getting wagged at him that you have to do it. Those are the rules. So he picked his team, and Oberholz got all his calls, and he got on a plane and he flew across to Cardiff, and he had a new contract because Mallet's contract was coming up for renewal, and in the new contract was, you will pick X amount of quota players.
So just to jump in quickly, so this is, we talking about Thursday here for a Saturday game, or are we talking earlier in the week?
This was now about the Wednesday, when so Oberholzer meets with Mallet on the Wednesday, and he says, you cannot pick an all-white team. You've got to make a plan here. And Mallet basically tells him to piss off. And
sorry, one more question. This is the 15. What was the bench like? Were there any non-white players on the bench?
It's a good question. I actually, you've caught me out there. I haven't done my.
No, just asking out of interest. Yeah, just thought about it.
Anyway, we're talking about the starting 15 was totally Caucasian. So Mallet and Oberholzer have a showdown on the Wednesday. Mallet stands his ground and says, I won't be pushed around on this. This is my contract. I can pick who I want. This is my strongest team to beat Wales. That's it. Oberholzer is completely pissed off. And as is his right, the next day, he's the boss of the South African Rugby Union. He demands a meeting with the team and the management. So he addresses them in the team room of their hotel in Cardiff. This is now Thursday, 48 hours before kickoff.
And is he talking to all the players, Mike, or is he only talking to Mallet and the captain?
Everyone who's there, who's involved with the Springboks management, players down to the ball boys. So he now addresses them, and he tells them that this is a watershed day. Never again will there be an all-white Springbok team. You guys are not playing ball with transformation. This is all completely offsides. Things will never be the same again. And you guys can either like it or lump it. The players are sitting there like they didn't pick themselves. Dion Kaiser and Brayton Porser are sitting there, and they're feeling extremely uncomfortable and embarrassed. And when Oberholz has finished his little tirade, he walks out, and the players apparently booed him. And now they have a little meeting amongst themselves, and they're completely pissed off because now they've suddenly just been told that things are going to be different. And it's right that things are going to be different, but do you deliver that message 2 days before kickoff? Now, the guys who have got to play the game are now being told that their livelihoods are going to be affected going forward because the space has now got to be made for changes in the complexion of the team. And apparently they were completely demoralized by all of these events. And while they didn't publicly ever blame that for the fact that they lost to Wales, it certainly was a massive contribution. Sometimes, or most of the time, a rugby match is determined by what happens between the 4 white lines on the day. But every now and again, something happens behind the scenes that can sabotage a team's morale and their focus. And that happened that day. From, the guys talk after the fact many years later. They say, oh, well, look, that wasn't very lekker. Just be, hours before.
I think you're right. And one of the comments I made to you yesterday about this story was, I'm a punter. I'm a rugby punter. I've been a rugby punter for many years, and that's information that's very valuable to people. That's very interesting, because as soon as a team is demoralized or what. I mean, I remember that game. I actually didn't remember the score, but I remembered, that was the first time they'd ever beaten us, and I was quite shocked. I remember talking about that game before, and guys always ask me, "Hey, Gavin, what do you like this weekend?" And I was quite confident. I remember being very confident on South Africa in that particular tournament, and I've never really worried about the players so much. I've always believed that they do pick the best team that they can under the circumstances and conditions they're allowed to. So that's very interesting information, because you're right. Players get demoralized and they're not interested, and then it has a bit of an after effect, or it goes on to you go and look at the results of the following week or the next game, or even the next couple of games, and you think, well, this didn't just end at that game. It probably carried on for a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I think so. That was a historic game on two counts, because it was the first time Wales had ever beaten South Africa in like 90 years of trying. And it was the last time an all-white Springbok team took the field. So we could say it was necessary growing pains, because, if you look at our rugby today, I mean, we had to start transforming at some point, and it was just unfortunate that it came like sort of with the players looking down Oberholz's barrel of his shotgun. But that was it. A line was drawn in the sand, no matter how painful it was, and things changed, and have changed for the better.
And now tell me, Mark, you were at that. Were you at that game? Did you go and watch that?
No, I wasn't. But one of my colleagues, a close friend of mine, a good colleague of mine, Gavin Rich, was, and that's where this information I've got comes from, because Gavin was on the spot.
Well, that's interesting, because I'm not going to suggest we're breaking news to anybody here for something that happened 20 odd years ago. But,
22 years,
yeah. Did this ever make it to a newspaper or into public forum?
Look, the Oberholzer addressing the guys in the team room didn't, because that was amongst them, and they didn't want to make a big scene about it and make the whole situation worse. But at that time in 1999, it was front page news that because what happened is Gavin Rich was tasked by the Cape Times newspaper, a very liberal newspaper they still are. They were big on the story that the Boks had reverted to an all-white team, and they tasked Gavin Rich, who worked for them at that time, to approach Mallet and say, "Look, Nick, what's going on here? It looks like you've got off the transformation bus here." And Mallet was quite forthright. He said to Gavin Rich, "I won't be pushed around on this issue. I select the team, and it's on merit, and I am not going to be responsible for putting guys in who possibly know that the guys in front of them are the better players." Okay, so we're talking Stefan de Blanche. I think Dion Kaiser was still starting out. Stefan was an established Springbok. We're talking about Peter Rousseau, who was a really good Springbok wing, and Brayton had just made his debut. So I think in the pecking order, that was right. Stefan and Peter were probably in ability at that time ahead of Kaiser and Polser. So they would have, Mallet was intimating that if those guys were then leapfrogged, the first choice guys, they would feel uncomfortable and feel that perhaps there was a little bit of window dressing going on here. They would feel embarrassed that Rousseau and de Blanche were now sitting on the bench behind him. So that Mallet said, I'm not going to pick players and have them feel maybe a little bit embarrassed that they're not there completely on merit. And all that made the front page of the Cape papers at that time.
Yeah, but as you said, they had to start somewhere, and I don't think there's any South African rugby fan alive at the moment that's going to be unhappy with what's been going on. Not from then, but certainly recently. We are a very proud nation when it comes to our team, and we've they win World Cups. The cricket guys haven't done it. The soccer guys haven't done it. So there's There's nothing wrong with it. I'm happy. All
Well,
right, let's move on. Second last thing of the show. What are our predictions for this week's game? Right, so the bookmakers have got Wales as 6-point underdogs. They're expecting South Africa to win by sort of 7 or more, or Wales to lose by 6 or less, or possibly win the game. Now, we just spoke about them not having much of a great record in Wales since the 1995 World Cup, since losing that very first game. Yeah, I like South Africa at the moment. I'm not, and a lot of people call me biased because I often do punt South Africa, but I do like them. They came right when they played New Zealand. They were quite shocking against Australia. They were probably average against Argentina after beating the Lions. But I think this is a game they can win, and I think they can win reasonably comfortably. When I say that, probably looking at about 12 to 15 points is what I'm expecting. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, look, this is one the Boks really ought to win. Wales are a little bit weakened up front, especially they've got a number of forwards who are out. I think they're there for the taking. The one thing I would be a bit worried about is the margin of victory. I think this game will be an absolute grind, and it always is. Springboks and Wales, it becomes an absolute forward arm wrestle. It's a kick fest. The last 5, 6, 7 games have been exactly like that, and I don't think this is going to be any different, especially with the way we play. I think people read too much into what the All Blacks do to, like they won by 50 points last week. It's a different ball game this week, different styles of play. I think this will be, I think the bookies are just about right, 7, 8, 9 points. Maybe the Boks will get those breakaway tries, that the wings sometimes get, the Colby tries, the Makazola Mapimpi tries, maybe. But I would say, 7 to 12 points. But the Boks should do it. They'll be a heck of a disappointed if they lose this one.
Okay, and all right. So we will do this every show. We have a Stoker's Arms 250 Rand voucher giveaway, and we will do this as a giveaway during the show in future. But because this was our first one, we've marketed it a little bit, and there's only been a couple of people watching, so I'm not going to ask we're not going to ask any questions pertaining to the particular show, but we'll leave it open. South Africa play Wales at 7:30 on Saturday night. So stick your prediction in the comments, and whoever gets the closest will win a 250 Rand Stoker's Arms voucher. That's in Kloof here in Durban. We're both in Durban. If you don't live in the Durban area, or you're not going to make it here by the end of December, you're certainly welcome to pass it on to somebody you know in Durban, and we will transfer. It's fully transferable. But yeah, nice pub down there. That's Garstone and his cronies. I wouldn't call myself an absolute regular at Stoker's. I'm sure you've been there a few times, Mike. But it's a great pub, good food, nice beer, and plenty of people to chat to there. So yeah, just in the comments section, which will there is the live comments, but you can go in the post comments as well. The closest to the actual score on Saturday night at 7:30, we will award the prize. But I think that's it. We've hit 28 minutes, probably a few minutes longer than we expected to do. But good fun chatting to you, Mike. It was a good start. And yeah, I'll go and stick this on some socials and get us a few more views. And we'll be back next week. But we're going to do it next week, Wednesday. And we'll go from there. And if you've got any ideas for us, not ideas, but suggestions, or you want to hear us talk about something specifically, stick it in the comments as well. We'll put it on our list. If we like it, we'll give it a go and we'll chat.
Thanks, Gav.
No problem. Enjoy the evening, Mike. Enjoy the rugby on Saturday. I know I'm going to.